Okay, let's try this again. All right, I am in my office, not at my house, because I was trying to avoid any technical problems, and well, that worked well. This is take number 2, so if you were on the other feed, I hope you hopped over to this again. I have 3 sons and a foreign exchange student, and Sunday nights are homework time. Even when it's the night before Veterans Day, you still have to give them the bandwidth. So instead of fighting over keeping them off the bandwidth while doing a YouTube Live, I said, let's just not fight and I'll go to the office. Anyway, thanks for everybody tuning in. Sundays are when I start my fast, and I have a couple of big announcements. So I'm so thankful for those of you that are tuning in. And again, those of you that witnessed my blooper with take 1, I hope you make it to this side. Sorry. All right, so I'm Dr. Bosworth, and I am an internal medicine physician. I'm in private practice, and I run a internal medicine clinic. What does that mean? That means I'm in the long game. I take care of chronic disease, chronic illness. And for over 20 years, it's been my focus and my mentality to predict what's going to happen in the long run. If I look at where my specialty has come about, it has everything to do with health of your brain and longevity. I suppose that's just chronic illness coming to a forefront, but I have been lucky enough to be on some really great teams where mentors helped me appreciate what happens when a brain gets old, but they're not so old, and how to help patients get better. I've had some amazing mentors with teaching me about the art and science of sleep health and sleep hygiene, and how to get patients off of medications instead of on so many. So tonight I have a couple of big announcements, and then I have some things that I want to go through because I've had a lot of questions. So these YouTube Lives have been really helpful for me in a way to answer what I think is an incredible blessing. Over the last month, I've gained over 50,000 YouTube followers. I had 2,000 a month and a half ago. So this is a learning curve where I have really tried to grab onto the rope of what this change means in hopes to be the best resource for helping not just my patients get longevity, but to really translate the information about how do we help patients get off of some of these meds and educate them about a better way of living. Really use the evidence-based medicine that I practice and that many of my colleagues practice, but we talk to patients one day at a time, one patient at a time. And if there's one thing I've learned over the last 6 months, it's the power of what happens through YouTube. So I wrote a book. The book was not something I meant. I didn't have dreams about doing this, but I wrote this book Any Way You Can. And the book came from a time when my mother was very sick. She'd had cancer for 10 years, and I had been studying a way to repair brains called ketosis. And I was a little embarrassed at how little I knew, but it took only a few days of just stopping my life, sitting there at the library and saying, this is going to change my practice. And I really haven't looked back. I took the notes that I was learning from when I was studying, and I wrote them down, and I kept giving them to my mom. At the time, my mom was really sick. She was fighting a very rapidly growing cancer and needed chemotherapy. Reading those textbooks or many of the ketogenic books was not an option. She was too sick. So I got the cardinal question, which said, if the person you love the most, if your number one patient, my mom, was dying of cancer, what would you do? And I told her we were going to fight it any way we could, which is the name of the book, Any Way You Can, Fight It Any Way You Can. So the book title is Any Way You Can, and it has reached a little sticker called #1 bestseller on Amazon, and many of my teachers for the ketogenic diet are now in the same search pages as me, which is totally remarkable. But that's not what I'm talking about tonight. I have a few things that I want to make sure I go through, so I'm just going to look at my notes. All right, so number one, I am incredibly grateful for the success of this channel, but also for the number of people that have taken time to review my book. I had no idea that a book review was so important until I saw what happened when people would leave book reviews, which lead to more book reviews, which lead to more awareness. So if you haven't read my book, I have put it on sale this week for 99 cents. And this is really in hopes to get it out to as many people as possible. What has been wildly rewarding are the comments that patients have put on those book reviews. Many of them have sent them to me in private messages, and I will ask for forgiveness right now. I didn't plan on this popularity, and I'm so far behind on all those messages that I'm sorry, I'm trying. But if you have left me a private message about my book, please, please, please go leave it on Amazon Book Review or post it on your social media as a way for sharing. The stories are incredible for the people who have been searching for some easy to understand information about the ketogenic diet. And I do think that's one of the blessings that I have honed over the last 20 years of taking care of patients, is that I am a great educator. It's probably my favorite title is teacher, whether that's to medical students, whether that's to patients, whether that's to inmates. I have embraced that when I'm teaching, I just feel God's grace flowing through me, and it really has been the most rewarding thing I've done. When I put those teachings into a book, which I need to say thank you to my husband who nudged me probably 100 times before I wrote the book, saying, you should put that in a book, you should put that in a book. And for all of you that have been married for 20 years, yeah, I just should have listened a lot sooner. Anyway, so the book came out and has been such a teachable moment for me to see how many more patients, how many more people I could connect with through that talent of educating. And I've taken that to heart by really using not the best editing skills, but they're YouTube videos that you probably found on this channel. And I was taking the lessons that I had put into the book and put them into videos. So I first started with the book. I pushed publish, and just mistakes and all. I just said let's just see where this goes. The next thing I did was I was asked to audio record it because several of my patients were too sick to read. Reading had been a joy to them in their past life, but their brain health was too poor. And I kept saying, you should read the book, you should read the book. It really helps you understand what we're trying to get across. So I was encouraged enough to record the book. Of note, if you haven't listened to the book, I do have a contest going to see who can hear when I stopped fasting. Because I had just figured out fasting when I was recording the book. My mom in the book fasted for over 40 days in a life or death situation. That journey helped me as a template for teaching. But the fasting was something I was not very brave about. I don't like missing meals, and I didn't. My husband had fasted for many days, but I didn't like missing meals at all. So I was using the recording of the book and then watching those elevated ketones that increase mental performance to take that recording all the way to the end of the week. In the end, what it came about was I made it through some of the late chapters is where I stopped fasting. I fasted for 7.5 days, and I can hear when I listen to the book where I stopped fasting. Of note, it took me to the third day to get past chapter 1 because I had a whole bunch of audio mistakes or just some learning curves that I was very frustrated. But I also think the hardest part of fasting is those first few days. So if you can identify which chapter I stopped fasting, you can send me a message on Facebook or YouTube, and I will reach out to you, and we'll do a chat together. We'll do a live post together. So It's been great to see people engage in not just reading the book, but then listening to the book. But what I found was there was yet another audience of people that were still too sick to listen to an audiobook. They really could just focus for pockets of time, which is what led me to do these videos. And I'll tell you, I found the first recording and just reposted it this week. I think I was on like take 20 because this was like very nerve-wracking, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And I finally just said, forget it. However this one turns out, we're going to use it. And I had posted it this past week. So if you're looking for a throwback, you'll see that on my blog and on YouTube this week. So 3 versions of how this book was available, which included the paperback and then the audiobook and then these YouTube videos. And what I've learned is an incredible heartfelt calling to say, seeing patients one person at a time is difficult because the learning curve for such a broad education could have been so much faster if I had a classroom. And I really think of YouTube as my classroom now, as a place to say, let me teach you. This does not substitute for medical advice. I do not want to have the liability of that, but I really do think that this is a topic that can be educated upon. And the announcement I have for tonight is that I have a patient tonight who is going to be live interviewed at the top of the hour. So we're doing this on Facebook. So I know many of you are YouTubers that don't go to Facebook, but I thought I'd make the announcement here. And if you'd like to join me, it's her first consult, and she's stalled out on her ketogenic diet. She's very nervous, so I'd like to just have any encouragement if you're on Facebook, just to tell her thanks for being brave enough to share your story. She's been a ketogenic woman for I think over 2 years now, but several months at least, and she's stalled. She stalled out, and she reached out to me, and I just felt like this was the best match for how can we use her story and my teaching to help you. So if you could tune in to the top of the hour over on Facebook, I would just love to see her encouraged, because she's really nervous about sharing her vulnerabilities of what happens when you're trying to do a diet and trying to lose weight and then you stall out. And so I said I'll be her doctor on a video chat, on a video live, and we're going to start on Sunday nights. So that brings me to that announcement. And more importantly, I have really been working to find a way to make a living doing Facebook and YouTube instead of one patient at a time. And right now, the only source of income that I can see working at this point, I know there's lots of ways, but it takes another full-time job to do some of them, is my book. So if you're watching this video, or if you're a subscriber to my channel, please take advantage of the 99-cent book this week and go buy it. I'll put a link in the show notes. But what I've learned is these little videos and these live chats are the more advanced lessons. Many questions come in from the basics, like why do I recommend 20 carbohydrates? Do I recommend fiber or no fiber? Why do I insist that you check your blood sugars? And this interview that's going to start at the top of the hour is going to go through some of those. You're going to see my approach to taking care of patients. And I think you're going to find a lot to be answered. But it would be unbelievably welcomed if you would also augment that education with the book. If you're having a tough time and your brain's kind of in that mushy brain fog that I know a lot of my patients have trouble with, please use the audiobook. I read the audiobook. It's done really well. I really think it was a blessing. I wasn't going to record it, but through a happenstance said, okay, I guess I can do it. So over the last month, 50,000 people have subscribed to this YouTube channel. If each of you bought that 99-cent book, I would be able to put together a lot more videos. So it would be awesome. But either way, I'm committed to doing this. I really enjoy the teaching, and I can't believe how many patients are being attracted and helping their doctor to get aware of what this very evidence-based, incredibly well-researched nutritional advice can do for patients. I have a couple of stories that I want to end with. A couple of weeks ago, I was sharing that the reason I fast is for patients. The first time I fasted was when I recorded that book. That was the longer fast for me. And it was a moment of bravery before I would fast. So when I ask patients, when they get to the part of the ketogenic diet where I say, I really think you can do this. I'd like you to go 24 hours without any calories. And then we walk through the rules of, that means no sugar substitutes, that means black coffee only. If you're looking at the advanced, strictest of strict fasts, that means water and salt only, no coffee, no tea. I'm a coffee lover, and if you took away my coffee, I would have a withdrawal headache, so I tend to, birds of a feather flock together. I tell patients they can have their black coffee. But as I do that, the first time people fast, they think it's ridiculous. Like, this must be bad for your health. So there's nothing more confident boosting than asking a patient to fast, and I fast with them. So every Sunday I start fasting, and 2 weeks ago I explained that sometimes I only fast for 12 hours, but I like to get to at least 24 hours, and if it's a good week, 36 hours. Sometimes I'll make it all the way to 72 hours, and that's great, but the 72-hour fast has to have a purpose. That fasting is difficult. Saying no to one of the primal instincts of eating needs to have a message in your heart that I connect to a patient who's going through a difficult story. As a physician, I have thousands of difficult stories, and when I take the time to fast with the patient and I use their story to get me through, I can often hit 72 hours, and 2 weeks ago I hit 77 hours because of this specific patient. He was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. I hadn't seen him at church for several weeks, and then when I did, he had lost a ton of weight. He wasn't my patient, but he's my friend from church, and so I prayed for him. Every time I wanted to eat, I would use his story as a way to motivate me to discipline myself through a wave of hunger. It sounds extreme if you've never fasted, so please just brush through this if you haven't done your first fast. But he hasn't been in church since that encounter, so I still want to just use his story as in my heart that he's doing okay, that whatever he's suffering with, that other people are around praying for him and helping him. But it brings me back to, why do I fast? The fasting is an advanced speed of getting your body to something called autophagy. And tonight, there's another patient that I ran into after church today who has cardiomyopathy. And if you've not heard that word, her heart muscles, her heart cells have remodeled because of chemotherapy. And her chemotherapy has led to that heart not being as strong. Part of it was from her cancer, but also part of it is from what the medications do when she took the chemotherapy. She's gotten through her cancer. She's been labeled cancer-free, and I would really like to use her story to get me through the next, I hope to go 48 hours this week. She'd never heard about autophagy. She didn't know anything about my channel or the book, or maybe she'd heard about the book, but she was too sick to read it. So I encouraged her to go to the YouTube channel and look up that video on autophagy and how when you look at your biomarkers, we are trying to get the body to remodel cells that are ill, that are rusty and old and have lots of debris in them. These are all slang words, but I'm trying to get your brain to imagine when you have a chronic disease, the body stops cleaning up a lot of the proteins throughout your body. I talk a lot about the proteins in the brain and that leading to depression and poor sleep and memory problems and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Those are these chronic diseases of the brain. And as you look at what ketosis does for that brain disease, it's a powerful fast forward to getting that autophagy and brain cleanup. I cannot tell you the number of patients that have come to me with a little bit of depression, and really they have depression as a result of chronic brain illnesses. And we start them on a ketogenic diet and then really use an autophagy stimulation, trying to get autophagy to help remodel those cells in their brain. And this woman that I ran into today after church, her cardiomyopathy, if she wants to remodel, have a chance at, she's in her 70s, late 70s, if she wants a chance of remodeling those cells, we really have to help her body spark autophagy. There's not a blood test that I can do that says for sure you're doing autophagy, but it's where I do post in my book, and I have a couple of blogs coming out in the next few weeks about what ranges do I want you to reach if you're my patient and we're trying to ignite autophagy. I use a ratio of blood sugar and divide the ketones into the blood sugar. You'll see on Instagram, and I will repost them into Facebook, when I'm fasting, I measure my blood sugar. I have my own monitor, measure my blood sugar and measure my blood ketones, and then I divide them for a ratio. If the patients are looking for weight loss, I love that their ratio gets below 80. If they're between 50 and 80, they have a really good chance of having low blood or of having autophagy. If they've got a more advanced problem of an autoimmune or a sick heart or a sick brain, then I'm going to push their numbers to try and hit between 50 and 20. That's pretty intense. Their blood sugar is a lot lower and their ketones are higher. Again, there's no specific test that we can use for autophagy, but when they are fasting and they get those blood sugars down, you can see the ketones follow. The ketones rise, and then that ratio gets lower. So that's a huge part of my ability for patients to predict, are they in autophagy. If they have the most advanced problems that I use a ketogenic diet with, which is a cancer, much like my mom, in the book I go through this, we wanted her numbers to be 20 or less. That is incredibly intense. I would highly recommend that you have a doctor walking along with you when you do this. We are looking for a much more intense level of guaranteed autophagy. Autophagy doesn't happen at faster or lesser layers. You're going to be at an age where your body will ignite this cleanup system. How long it lasts is how long you keep those sugars low and those ketones high. So a fasted state can really push you into that area of autophagy, and instead of starting with a high glucose state, or I like to call it standard American diet, just normal carbohydrates, 100 200 carbohydrates, whatever it is you eat. If you fasted them, it would take at least 72 hours to get to a autophagy state. If you look closer at somebody on a ketogenic diet, they often have a much lower blood sugar over the course of a couple of weeks. And then the longer they practice ketosis, they really do have an improvement in their ketone production. So if they're looking for help with their cancer, I really, really do coach them and guide them to get those numbers higher, higher ketones, lower blood sugars, and that intermittent fasting has been a great way to do that. So this week I'm 8 hours, no, so 6.5 hours into my fast, and I hope to get to 48 hours. I am going to use my patient from my friend from 2.5 weeks ago that I haven't seen, the one with esophageal cancer, and the gal that I ran into, a former patient, actually a former patient's wife, who is suffering with some heart troubles, and I really just want to dedicate this fast to her. I would encourage you to follow along with me on Instagram for what my numbers are, what my ketones are. That ratio is much easier to understand when you see some examples. I am getting better at answering these questions, so if you have questions after you see those, please send that back. And I'm going to end with two things. Tune into Facebook at the top of the hour for the medical consult. give lots of encouragement to this woman who's really trying to to manage her courage and bravery to do a ketogenic diet consult online, and we'll have repeating visits for what she struggles with. And then please, if you haven't purchased the book, it really is important to me for sharing this information. Once people have read the book, they usually can think of somebody who they could encourage or get help with after reading the book. So Any Way You Can is the name of the book. 99 cents this week, and I'm super excited about how much impact the book is making in people's lives. If you have any doubt, please take a minute to go read some of the reviews. And the guy who posted one today is just one of the best reviews I've ever seen. He's in his late 80s, early 90s. He's like, I've never left a book review, and I'll let you read the rest because it's incredible. So I am going to sign off and get ready for, actually, I do have a little bit of time to go through some of these. Let's see. So a couple of questions. Where can you get the book for 99 cents? It's an ebook. It's on Amazon, and I've got a promotion for this week that it's 99 cents. So go for that. Let's see. Some things I shouldn't repeat. Yeah, so I did misspeak there somewhere. Somebody said not a blood sugar of 20. No, brains really do probably need a blood sugar of 40. I get a ton of questions with patients or with people saying, Doc, is my blood sugar too low? And one of the things I answer is, give me the other half of the information, which is what were your ketones and how did you feel? If your blood sugar is too low for your brain to figure out how to use ketones and hasn't been keto adapted, you will not be sitting there typing me on social media. You will be on the floor. So your brain does adapt. That is why I don't recommend fasting for the first few weeks you're in ketosis. I want your body practicing those ketones, really watching to see what your blood sugar is doing. I don't like people checking blood ketones the first couple of weeks. I like them using the cheap option, which is to pee on a ketone strip. It's a really great trick to just get your head in the game about what is your system doing. It's 2018. This is easy to biohack, and the tools are there. You do not need a prescription from me or any doctor. You can go to the pharmacy, buy the ketone strips, get a blood glucose monitor, and do this yourself. So yeah, you don't want a blood sugar of 20, you want a ratio of 20, which means that the blood sugar divided by the blood ketone, if those are my cancer patients, I will work with them to get that low of a ratio. Personally, I feel pretty proud when I get into the 40-ish range. I still have got plenty of human weaknesses too, so I will sign off and get prepared for this next post in about 30 minutes, so please tune in over there. I'll take time to answer these questions when I get done with my Facebook Live consult. So thank you again, and happy fasting.